February 3, 1943, 12:55 a.m. A German torpedo slams into USAT Dorchester, 100 miles south of Greenland. The electrical system dies instantly. 904 souls are plunged into darkness. Freezing water pours in. Panic spreads. And in that chaos, 4 men, a Methodist minister, a Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, and a Dutch Reformed minister, make a decision that will echo through history. They take off their life jackets. One by one, they hand them to terrified soldiers who have none. "Take this," they say, "you're going to need it." Then they link arms on the slanting deck and pray together as the ship goes down. The Four Chaplains, 674 dead. But 4 men who chose to die so others could live. The greatest act of interfaith unity and sacrifice in American military history. SS Dorchester was a civilian coastal liner built in 1926 and requisitioned by the U.S. Army in 1942 as USAT, United States Army Transport, Dorchester. At 368 feet long and displacing 5,649 gross tons, she was converted to transport troops and supplies to Allied bases. On January 23, 1943, Dorchester departed New York as part of convoy SG-19, bound for the Army Command Base at Narsarsuaq in southern Greenland, carrying 904 souls, 751 military personnel, 23 merchant marine crew, and 130 civilian workers. The convoy consisted of 3 transport ships escorted by 3 U.S. Coast Guard cutters, Tampa, Escanaba, and Comanche. On February 3, 1943, at 12:55 a.m., approximately 100 miles south of Greenland, German submarine U-223, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Karl Jörg Wächter, fired 3 torpedoes, one of which struck Dorchester amidships. The explosion killed dozens instantly, knocked out all electrical power, and flooded the engine room. The ship sank in approximately 20 minutes. Of 904 aboard, only 230 survived, one of whom later died from injuries. Among the 674 dead were 4 Army chaplains: Lieutenant George L. Fox, Methodist; Lieutenant Alexander D. Good, Jewish rabbi; Lieutenant John P. Washington, Catholic priest; and Lieutenant Clark V. Poling, Dutch Reformed minister, who gave their life jackets to others and went down with the ship. Their sacrifice became one of the most celebrated acts of heroism in American military history. SS Dorchester was built in 1926 by Bethlehem Shipbuilding Corporation in Quincy, Massachusetts, as a luxury coastal liner for the Merchants and Miners Transportation Company. For 16 years, she sailed peacefully between New York, Boston, Miami, and Havana, carrying passengers on leisurely cruises. But in 1942, with World War II raging and U-boats hunting American ships, the U.S. Army requisitioned Dorchester and converted her into a troop transport. Gone were the elegant staterooms and dining salons. Bunks were crammed into every available space. Armament was minimal, a few anti-aircraft guns, no significant armor. USAT Dorchester specifications: length, 368 feet, displacement, 5,649 gross tons, speed, 13 knots maximum, capacity, approximately 900 troops and crew. By January 1943, Dorchester had completed 4 successful Atlantic voyages, transporting troops and supplies to Greenland, a strategic base for protecting Arctic convoys to the Soviet Union and defending against German weather stations. But she was a vulnerable ship, slow, lightly armed, sailing through waters infested with German U-boats. Her only protection was convoy escorts and constant vigilance. If this incredible story of sacrifice and heroism is moving you, hit that like button and subscribe, because the Four Chaplains' final act of courage represents the very best of humanity, in the darkest moments of war. January 23, 1943. Dorchester departed New York Harbor with 904 souls aboard. Among the passengers, 751 military personnel heading to Greenland bases, 23 civilian merchant marine crew, and 130 civilian workers hired to build and maintain Arctic facilities. Also aboard, 4 Army chaplains who'd met months earlier at the Army Chaplain School at Harvard University. First Lieutenant George L. Fox, 42, Methodist minister from Vermont, World War I veteran. First Lieutenant Alexander D. Good, 31, Reformed Jewish rabbi from Brooklyn. First Lieutenant John P. Washington, 34, Catholic priest from Newark. First Lieutenant Clark V. Poling, 32, Dutch Reformed minister from Ohio. 4 men from different faiths, different backgrounds, different traditions, but they'd become close friends during training, united by their mission: provide spiritual comfort to soldiers facing death. January 29, 1943. Dorchester departed St. John's, Newfoundland, as part of convoy SG-19. The convoy included 2 Norwegian freighters, Biscaya and Lutz, and 3 U.S. Coast Guard cutters as escorts. They steamed north into increasingly hostile waters, the Torpedo Alley, where German U-boats hunted Allied convoys. Captain Hans Danielson, Dorchester's master, warned passengers this was U-boat territory. German submarines had sunk multiple ships in these waters. Everyone was ordered to sleep fully clothed with life jackets on. Many ignored the order. The sleeping quarters below deck were hot, cramped, uncomfortable. Life jackets were bulky. Men removed them to sleep, violating direct orders that would soon cost hundreds of lives. February 3, 1943, night. Dorchester steamed through freezing Arctic waters approximately 100 miles south of Greenland. Air temperature, 20 degrees. Water temperature, 34 degrees. Cold enough to kill in minutes. The convoy maintained radio silence, zigzagging to evade submarines. But German intelligence had determined the convoy's route. 12:55 a.m., February 3rd. The submarine U-223 was lying in wait. Lieutenant Commander Wechter fired 3 torpedoes. One of them struck the Dorchester amidships, penetrating the hull below the waterline and exploding in or near the engine room. 12:55 a.m. The explosion was catastrophic. Dozens of men in the engine room and nearby berthing compartments died instantly, crushed by the blast, scalded by ruptured steam lines, or drowned as seawater flooded in at thousands of gallons per minute. The electrical system failed immediately, plunging Dorchester into total darkness. Emergency lighting didn't activate. Hundreds of men sleeping below deck woke in pitch-black compartments, disoriented, terrified, with freezing water rising around them. Captain Danielson tried to sound the abandoned ship signal, but there was insufficient steam pressure. Only a partial whistle blast sounded, not the full 6-whistle signal. Many men never heard the order to evacuate. Panic spread. Men scrambled toward deck, climbing ladders in darkness, slipping on icy rungs, trampling those who fell. Watertight doors slammed shut, trapping dozens below. Screams echoed through flooded compartments. On deck, conditions were equally chaotic. Dorchester listed heavily. Lifeboats were frozen in their davits. Crew members hacked at ice with axes, desperately trying to free boats. Some launched half full. Others capsized immediately in the rough seas. And critically, hundreds of men had ignored the order to sleep with life jackets on. They reached the deck without flotation devices. In water this cold, survival without a life jacket was impossible. The 4 chaplains, Fox, Good, Washington, and Poling, emerged from their cabin fully dressed. They began organizing evacuation, guiding men to lifeboat stations, calming panic, offering prayers and reassurance. Then they noticed men were arriving on deck without life jackets. The chaplains opened a storage locker containing emergency life jackets. They distributed them quickly, calmly. But the supply ran out. Men still arrived, young soldiers, teenagers, terrified and shivering, facing certain death. The four chaplains looked at each other. No words were needed. They knew what had to be done. One by one, they removed their own life jackets and handed them to soldiers. "Take this," Reverend Fox said to a young private. "You're going to need it more than I will." "Put this on, son," Father Washington said, strapping his jacket onto a soldier barely 19 years old. Rabbi Good and Reverend Poling did the same, sacrificing their only chance of survival so 4 young men could live. Survivors later testified that as Dorchester tilted and began her final plunge, the 4 chaplains stood together on the slanting deck, arms linked, voices raised in prayer. Methodist, Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, united in faith and sacrifice, praying together in Hebrew, Latin, and English as the ship went down. 1:15 a.m. 20 minutes after the torpedo struck, Dorchester's bow rose sharply, propellers spinning uselessly in the air. Then she plunged, stern first, into the freezing Atlantic. The suction pulled swimmers underwater. Ice-cold water, 34 degrees warmth, killed within minutes. Men wearing life jackets floated but died from hypothermia. Those without jackets drowned immediately. Coast Guard cutters raced to the scene, pulling survivors from the water. But rescue was agonizingly difficult. Many men were too weak to grab rescue lines. Others froze to death while waiting for rescue boats. By dawn, 230 survivors had been rescued, though one later died from injuries. The remaining 674 were dead, including all 4 chaplains. Among the survivors, multiple soldiers saved by the chaplains' life jackets. They testified about the 4 men who gave away their only chance of survival, who stood together praying as the ship sank, who chose death so others could live. For 82 years, USAT Dorchester has rested where she died, approximately 600 feet down in the frigid waters 100 miles south of Greenland. The exact location remains classified, designated a war grave where 674 souls rest. No salvage attempts have been made. No explorers have disturbed her. She remains a tomb frozen in time, holding the memory of 4 men whose sacrifice transcended religion, rank, and self-preservation. If explorers could reach Dorchester, the descent would be treacherous. As we pass 50 meters, sunlight fades rapidly in the Arctic waters. At 100 meters, only submersible lights pierce the darkness. The water is near freezing, visibility minimal. At 180 meters down, approximately 600 feet, we reach the seafloor. Arctic currents are strong here, sediment clouds the water. And somewhere below, protected by law and respect, lies USAT Dorchester. If Dorchester were ever found, she would sit upright or listing heavily, her starboard side, where the torpedo struck, showing a massive wound amidships. The impact point would be a crater of twisted steel, the engine room blown open, the place where dozens died instantly. The deck would show where the 4 chaplains stood, near the lifeboat stations, where they distributed emergency jackets, where they removed their own and gave them away, the spot where they linked arms and prayed as the ship went down. Inside, if exploration were possible, the berthing compartments below deck would tell the story of panic and chaos. Bunks where men slept without life jackets, violating orders that cost them their lives. Watertight doors sealed shut, trapping those who couldn't escape in time. The storage locker where the chaplains distributed emergency life jackets would be empty. Every jacket taken, given to men who had none. The chaplain's cabin would show where they dressed in darkness, prepared for evacuation, made the decision that would define their legacy. Personal effects would litter the debris field. Bibles, prayer books, religious items carried by the chaplains, Father Washington's rosary, Rabbi Good's prayer shawl, Reverend Fox's Methodist hymnal, Reverend Poling's family photographs, each item representing a life given willingly for others. Among survivors' testimony, one image stands above all others: 4 life jackets, each marked with a chaplain's name, worn by 4 soldiers who lived because 4 men of God chose to die. Those life jackets, worn by teenagers who survived, who went home to families who lived full lives, who had children and grandchildren, represent the power of sacrifice. They represent 4 men who embodied their faith's highest teachings. Love thy neighbor. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. All 4 were posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross and Purple Heart. In 1948, Congress created the Special Medal for Heroism, specifically to honor the 4 chaplains. In 1988, they were designated honorary chaplains of the entire U.S. Armed Forces. February 3rd is observed as Four Chaplains Day by presidential proclamation. But their greatest memorial isn't medals or statues. It's the 4 young soldiers who survived because of them, the families those soldiers raised, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who exist because 4 chaplains gave their life jackets away. USAT Dorchester rests where she died, a protected war grave holding 674 souls. Among them, 4 men who proved that faith without works is dead. They didn't just preach love and sacrifice, they lived it, and died living it. In that final moment as the ship went down, they weren't Methodist, Catholic, Jewish, or Protestant. They were brothers, chaplains, servants of God and humanity, and they died together, proving that the highest form of faith is love. If this story of ultimate sacrifice moved you, honor the memory of the 4 chaplains by sharing their story. Hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible stories of heroism and humanity from World War II, and turn on notifications, because these 4 men gave everything to save others, and their example of interfaith unity and selflessness deserves to be remembered forever. What other acts of heroism from World War II should we explore? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep these stories of courage and sacrifice alive.